What's up, guys? Doing a whole build series on this 2022 520 Rubicon double clutch independent rear suspension quad. This quad was actually purchased by Terache Tires, so they're making a bunch of parts. I said, hey, we need a double clutch unit. We need something with independent rear suspension to test out some of our IRS axles and some of our IRS prop shafts, stuff like that. So they said, yep, go ahead, find a good deal. I want to buy one. So this is the first vehicle that I'm testing and working on that I haven't bought my own money, guys. So everyone thinks I got all this free stuff. This is the first sponsored build, and it's going to be sick. So I threw the 30s I already had on it, but of course this is going to get the new XX mud tires, fresh set of the black bead locks. We're going to put 4 Terache axles in it, and a bunch of other parts we're working on. So should be a really cool build. This is like the first 24 hours. I'm just throwing it together, getting it waterproof so I can enter it into the Vessel Power Sports bounty hole at the graveyard this weekend. It's kind of a rush build, but it came out pretty good, and I think it'll do just fine. All right, guys, I just got home with the super clean 2022 Rubicon 520 double clutch transmission. See how it says auto there, and it's got a high and low and drive there. So yeah, never had one of these. I've worked on a ton of them. They're good machines. Just got to keep the water out of the oil. So of course tonight we are going to snorkel it. We're going to do the crankcase mod. We're going to put a lift kit on it. We're going to put some bigger tires on it. These are already oversized. These are from 28 Sun Fs, which are great trail tires. So that was a big plus for me. Now that I have these sitting around, that'll be excellent for West Virginia on a lot of my rigs. But what we're going to do right now is a couple quick things that I do on everything I buy. So first of all, these storage compartments fill up with water. They only have one little drain. So I already drilled a bunch more holes in it. I removed the gasket to let it dry out. That's not waterproof. The gasket doesn't matter. Same thing with this storage compartment. Drilled more holes, removed the gasket. Same thing with this storage compartment. Drilled a bunch of big holes. Drilled a bunch of big holes in here so this doesn't get full of mud and rot out all my connections in my battery. Then the next thing you want to do is pull this cover off right here. So the reason I do that is because this will just trap moisture and rot these relays out. I actually always look in here before I buy something. See, all these relays are really clean. There's no corrosion in there. There's no mud in there. That's what you want to see. This thing's never been sunk. So yeah, it's probably a good buy if the relays look that clean. Brand new. Also, of course, this thing is not snorkeled. I do not buy anything that's snorkeled in general. But yeah, so we're just doing that little stuff. Next, we'll put it on some Aztecs. Then we will pull out this snorkel, put a good snorkel in there, and do all the vent lines. And yeah, as far as snorkeling this thing, it's exactly the same as an electric shift or a foot shift. We are going to put the Rancher 420 IRS airbox in it to properly delete that bladder. And that's about it. It'll be ready to go. Check all this stuff, make sure these covers are on properly so you don't get mud in your seals or mud in your electrical boxes. Those seals work pretty good as long as the cover is snapped. Sometimes they don't get snapped on by Honda though. I'm throwing on this lift kit because I want to get a little more clearance for the bounty hole. And I wasn't really planning on buying this machine today. A deal popped up and I went and get it. $6 grand for totally bone stock for a very cherry 2022. Couldn't pass it up. So this is the bracket lift that's off the front of our stretch kit. This is a standard bracket lift that everyone else sells. So I'm throwing that on the front. I'm going to fabricate something for the rear. I want to give you a quick tip real quick. Make sure you loosen up all of the bushings when you do this. So this bolt's loose. These are all 4 of these bolts and nuts are loose. That way you have full cycling of the suspension and you can make sure there's no binding. Anytime you install a lift kit, you want to loosen everything up, put your lift kit on, and then set the weight on it and tighten it down with the weight on it ideally. That way your bushings are operating in their most comfortable zone. Helps the bushings last longer. It helps a lot of stuff like that. But yeah, pro tip. So I'm just going to throw that little bracket on there. I got to find some bolts and nuts because I've used the ones that came with this on the Foreman, I think. But yeah, a little spacer goes in there. And then one bracket goes across. And then the other bracket goes on the back. Very simple. All these work that way. I'll probably blow up these front axles because these Honda axles, especially on the new ones, are junk. The boots are really junky. The Honda axles have gotten worse and worse and cheaper as the years have gone by. So that's great. But don't worry, I've got some Terache axles on the way for this thing. So those will get upgraded soon. Then we're going to do all of our vent lines and snorkel it. Yada, yada, yada. Good to go. All right, I got the lift kit done. And then I put on the Terache wheel adapters. 25 millimeter all the way around, and that lets us put on the Terache bead locks with 30-inch Terache tires. Yes, it's all very dirty right now. Got to shine it up for the weekend, but it's coming along. Now the next step is to pull the airbox and throw it away. So that's the airbox over there. This is a new airbox. So this is a Rancher 420 IRS airbox. See, there's no hole here. Just more waterproof, and they're cheap. It's the cleanest way to do it. You got to pull the airbox and seal the boots anyway, so you might as well just get the right airbox if they're in stock, which they typically aren't. I lucked out. So yeah, so I'm gonna let this all dry overnight, so it's nice to work with tomorrow, and then I can snorkel it. While I'm in here, I did notice that this person took this machine back to the dealership, most likely for the valve adjustment, and the dealer put all the clips in the wrong spots. They didn't put any of the plastics back together properly. Everything's all tore up looking. So I'm fixing all that in the process. I'm also doing the crankcase breather mod. You can see right there, that's the extension that's gonna go up to the top of the airbox, and that's why this is capped, the old crankcase breather location. There's your rear diff line vent. So this is currently the lowest geared Honda that is sold because it has a little high and low range sub-transmission back here. It's geared about 6 or 7% lower than the Footshift 500, which is right outside the garage, my camouflage one. So because it's geared a little bit lower, I think it's gonna turn these 30s just fine, even in some fairly thick mud. One more thing to mention, the differentials are totally clean. I check them when I go buy anything, make sure they're not milky. Oil was clean, airbox was clean, all the vent drains were clean. This thing has never been in mud. I mean, you see a little bit water splashed up in here, but probably never been in mud deeper than this, because if it had, there would have been water in the vent lines. The factory vent lines are very low down. You can see your mechanism here. That's the cable that shifts your little sub-transmission for your high and low range, which is why there's a heat shield back here. So yeah, a little different than what I'm used to, but I've worked on plenty of these over the years. From here forward, the engine's very similar to a Rancher 420 DCT. From here back, it's different because again, you have the high and low range. Okay, the snorkel's done. I just need to put the top on. I didn't make an order for this because I had to get it done in less than a day. So I just usually had laying around. So I had one piece of black ABS here. The rest of it is white because that's what I could find at Ace Hardware. So yeah, not the most beautiful snorkel setup, but it's the same way I always do it. You got 2-inch pipe all the way to the airbox. At the very end, you use a 1.5 to 2-inch coupler to go onto the factory airbox piece. Curves around the engine nicely, so it doesn't get too close to it. And of course, it's strapped down in a lot of places to keep the snorkel from bouncing and loosening up the airbox. And the airbox is fully sealed, obviously. Vent lines, this is gas tank, this is front diff, rear diff, and fan, and this is coolant overflow. So obviously point the gas tank vent away from you because they do tend to spit a little bit of gas occasionally on these machines. Nothing to really worry about in my opinion. And then if you do it that way, you can get 3 vent lines, and you can use the vent lines to cover up most of the words on the snorkel, which I think looks nice. And I made the snorkel pretty high on this one because other people are going to ride it, and I don't want them to sink it. But yeah, so I got to put the other tire on, and then the last thing to do is to fabricate a rear lift. So I got a piece of metal at Ace Hardware. I'm going to fabricate a bracket lift with a bunch of different holes for different stiffnesses and ride heights. I'll show you how that comes out. But it's about ready to go. So I'm fabricating a lift kit for the back of this Rubicon, and the reason I'm not buying one is because I couldn't get one fast enough. I need it for the event. So cut some metal to fit down between the frame rails, extend the suspension outward, and then I just took a pencil, stuck it in the shock, and traced on there where the travel would be. So I got the suspension right now set where both the axles are as far down as they'll go. Not binding, but you know, right before binding basically. And then I just trace that arc on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill me a couple different holes so I can play with having the shock here, 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 here. All the same amount of down travel, but the stiffer, it'll be stiffer the farther you go out because the shock will be more straight up and down. A lot of these lift kits I think are a little too stiff, so I'm going to make myself a few different positions and play with it that way. Once I'm done, I'll just copy this onto another piece of steel and bolt it together with some spacers. Good to go. There's the second blank with the holes drilled. Really quick to cut with these new steel chop saws. I drill holes at the angles there to take off the stress concentrations. And yeah, the second part took me like 5 minutes to make. The first part, maybe 30 minutes. So not too bad. Maybe I'll put these in production. I don't know. I think other people are already doing it with multiple holes, so maybe I won't. But pretty cool. All right, there she sits. I put a very tall snorkel on it because that's the piece of pipe I had laying around, and it looks funny. We got the 30-inch Aztecs on there, and the bead locks with the adapters. We made fabricated a little lift kit, a 2-inch lift kit with some adjustability. We got it on the highest setting right now because we're going to a bounty hole this weekend, so maximum ground clearance seemed like the thing. I'm sure the stock axles will break. We got a little bracket lift up front as well. There's our PVC snorkel because I couldn't find any ABS in time. But yeah, had this thing less than 24 hours and it's fully waterproofed. It's got a lift kit, it's got 30-inch tires, so pretty good progress, I think so. I'd say so myself. Also fully serviced, greased the rear axles, checked all the bearings, ball joints, tie rod ends, and everything's about brand new on this thing. So we'll see how it does in the IRS Vessel Power Sports bounty hole at Graveyard, King of the Deep, whatever. God, there's so many names. But yeah, looks pretty sweet. Good mod to do right here. Drill a hole and put a little zip tie, so if that door comes off, you don't lose it. Pro tip. Yep. Did a bunch of little stuff like that, but mostly just snorkel, lift, tires, and of course wheel adapters to run the bead locks.